See, when a man has no one but God, he walks into a realm where earthly attachments lose their grip and eternity becomes real. This is not just loneliness, this is sacred ground. It is the place where the soul discovers its true dependence, not on the approval of others, not on material stability, not on fleeting comforts, but on the presence of the living God. Some of the greatest men who ever walked this earth were men who spent time in the wilderness of isolation. Abraham walked away from everything familiar to follow a voice he could not see. Joseph was betrayed, sold, imprisoned, and forgotten before the dream came to pass. Elijah stood alone against kings and prophets of false gods. They all walked through the fire of solitude, but not a single one walked alone, and neither will you. You are not abandoned. You are being refined. You are not forgotten. You are being prepared. God is doing a work in you that no man can see yet. That's why you must not give up. Don't curse the silence. Don't run from the stillness. Stay with it. Something holy is happening. When the world leaves you behind, when friends fall away, when loved ones don't understand, when you stand at the edge of yourself and say, God, I can't take one more step, that's when heaven answers with power. That's when strength rises that's not your own. That's when peace comes in the middle of a storm, not because the waves stop, but because you finally saw the one who walks on water. Faith is forged not in comfort, but in contradiction. When everything says you're alone, yet you choose to believe you're held. When everything says you're finished, yet you hear the still small voice say, I'm not done with you yet. That's faith. That's fire-tested belief, and that is unshakable. God has always been in the business of showing up when all other options are gone. He doesn't need favorable conditions. He doesn't require a crowd. He doesn't wait for perfect timing by human standards. He steps into the prison cell, into the lion's den, into the fiery furnace, not after the crisis, but right in the middle of it. And he does it again and again for those who call on his name. You may be feeling overlooked today. Maybe no one sees your pain. Maybe they see your strength, but not your struggle. They see the smile, but not the sleepless nights. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to believe the lie that you have to carry this all on your own. But I came to tell you, you don't. You were never meant to. There's one who sticks closer than a brother. One who will never leave you nor forsake you. One who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. One whose eyes are on the sparrow and whose arms are underneath you even now. He sees the hidden battles. He sees the broken places. He sees the tears that no one else sees. And he says, you are mine. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. There's a kind of prayer that comes only when a man is out of options. It's not polished. It's not pretty. It's raw. It's real. It's desperate. It's the cry that rises from the dust and the ashes and says, God, if you don't show up, I won't make it. And that kind of prayer moves heaven. When you reach the end of yourself, you reach the beginning of grace. And grace is not some fragile concept. Grace is a force. It lifts you up when your knees give out. It carries you when your strength is gone. It wraps you in mercy when you've failed again. Grace is the hand of God pulling you out of the pit, not because you earned it, but because he loves you. I don't know what valley you're walking through. I don't know what the silence feels like in your life, but I do know this. If you've got God, you've got everything you need. When the world fades, when people walk away, when doors close, God remains. And not only does he remain, he restores. God doesn't just sit with you in your brokenness. He rebuilds you. He doesn't just comfort you in your sorrow. He gives you beauty for ashes. He gives you strength for your weakness. He turns mourning into dancing. He turns weeping into joy. There is a future for you. There is hope beyond the pain. There is life after the loss. But you won't find it chasing the approval of people or the pleasures of this world. You'll find it on your knees alone with the one who shaped you in the womb and knows the number of hairs on your head. Don't despise this season. Don't rush the process. Lean into it. Let it purify you. Let it simplify you. Let it draw you closer to the only one who can satisfy the deep places of your heart. This world is full of noise, opinions, distractions, lies. But when you're alone with God, that noise fades. And what's left is truth. What's left is love. What's left is power. That power will fill you. That love will change you. That truth will set you free. There will be a day when you look back on this season not with bitterness, but with gratitude. You'll say, it was in that lonely place that I learned to listen. It was in that dark valley that I found the light. It was when I had no one else that I realized God was all I ever needed. And when you rise from this place, you'll carry something unshakable. You'll have a testimony forged in fire. You'll speak with authority, not because you read it in a book, but because you lived it in your bones. You'll carry peace into chaotic rooms. You'll bring hope to broken people. And when they ask, how did you survive? You'll say, I had no one but God. And that was enough. You are not disqualified. You are not too far gone. You are not beyond repair. In fact, you are exactly where you need to be for a miracle to unfold. When a man has no one but God, he is ready to be used by God. He is no longer leaning on shallow support systems. He is no longer intoxicated with applause. He is no longer chasing what can never satisfy. He is standing on the rock. And that kind of man cannot be shaken. This is not the end of your story. This is the chapter that changes everything. Stay faithful, stay humble, stay available. God is not done. He is writing something beautiful, even if right now all you see are broken lines. Trust the author. He finishes what he starts. When a man finds himself in the depths of solitude, it is easy for him to feel as though he has been abandoned by the world. The silence of an empty room, the absence of voices, and the lack of human presence can be overwhelming. In those moments, loneliness can feel like a curse, a painful reminder of what has been lost, or of the relationships that have faded away. But what if this very solitude is not a curse at all? What if it's the sacred space where God works most powerfully in a man's life? The truth is, solitude is often where transformation takes place, where a man can hear the voice of God most clearly and where his soul can be shaped for something greater. It is in the quiet, in the moments of being alone, that a man can strip away the distractions of the world. The hustle and bustle of life often drown out the still, small voice of God. In the noise of daily living, we are bombarded with opinions, expectations, and endless demands. But when a man is alone, without the pressure of pleasing others or responding to the constant stream of noise, it becomes easier to listen, to reflect, and to be still in the presence of God. In solitude, a man is invited into a deeper relationship with his Creator. There is no one else to impress, no one else to answer to, just the unfiltered connection between the soul and the Almighty. This is the space where God can begin His work of personal transformation. The distractions that once clouded his mind fall away, and he begins to see clearly. Solitude allows a man to confront the deepest parts of his heart, the parts that are often hidden from the world and even from himself. It's in the silence that we can see our weaknesses, our fears, our doubts, and our insecurities. But this is not a cause for despair. It is an opportunity for growth. For it is in these moments that God can meet us where we are. Not in spite of our weaknesses, but because of them. God doesn't call the perfect. He calls the broken, the weary, the ones who have nowhere else to turn. And in the quiet, He begins to mold us into who we were always meant to be. Moreover, solitude isn't just a place of self-reflection. It is also a place of revelation. It is in the stillness that we can hear God's voice more clearly than ever. His words can cut through the noise of our lives and pierce our hearts with truth, wisdom, and guidance. When the distractions are gone, God's voice becomes the loudest thing in our lives. It is in solitude that we can truly surrender our plans, our ambitions, and our desires to Him. We stop trying to control every aspect of our lives and instead open ourselves to His leading. In that moment of surrender, the transformation begins. In solitude, we are not abandoned. We are being prepared. God uses this time to refine us, to teach us, and to strengthen us for the journey ahead. While it may feel uncomfortable, even painful, it is in these times of isolation that we become who we were always meant to be. God works through our solitude to draw us closer to Himself and to help us become more like Him. Solitude is not a place of emptiness. It is a place where the fullness of God's presence can fill us, renew us, and transform us from the inside out. Throughout history, many of the greatest individuals were not thrust into greatness by fame, fortune, or applause, but by seasons of solitude and challenge. It is in the wilderness, far from the spotlight, that God often does His most profound work in a person's life. When Moses fled to the wilderness, when David was tending sheep, when Jesus withdrew to the desert, they were not being abandoned. They were being prepared. The wilderness is not the end of the story. It is often the very place where God begins to shape us for the work ahead. The wilderness, by its nature, is a place of isolation and hardship. It's a place where the comforts of the world are stripped away, leaving a person with only what truly matters. In the wilderness, there are no distractions, no applause, and no external validation. It's just a person and their Creator. And it is in this quiet, challenging environment that God works in ways we cannot always understand in the moment. There is a profound transformation that happens in the wilderness, one that prepares a person not just for success, but for a life of purpose. Think of Moses. Before he could lead a nation, he spent 40 years in the wilderness, an exile, a fugitive running from his past mistakes. But in the wilderness, he learned humility, patience, and dependence on God. He experienced the voice of God in a burning bush, and it was in that moment that he realized his life was part of something much bigger than himself. Had he been in Egypt, surrounded by power and influence, he might have never learned the lessons that the wilderness taught him. The wilderness wasn't a punishment for Moses. It was the place where God prepared him for a divine purpose that would change the course of history. David, too, was anointed to be king, but he didn't immediately sit on a throne. Instead, he spent years running from King Saul, hiding in caves and living on the run. It was in these wilderness years that David grew in strength, character, and trust in God. He learned to lead people not through military might, but through humility and reliance on the Lord. He wrote many of the Psalms during this time, expressions of raw emotion, faith, and intimacy with God. Had he ascended to the throne without these formative years, he might not have been prepared to lead with the wisdom and grace that marked his reign. The wilderness is not just a physical place. It is often a spiritual condition that many of us experience in our lives. There are times when we find ourselves in seasons of difficulty, loss, or transition. During these seasons, it can feel as though we are far from God's presence, far from His purpose for our lives. But the truth is, these wilderness seasons are often the very places where God is preparing us for something greater. They are not dead ends. They are launching pads for what lies ahead. Just as God called Moses and David out of the wilderness at the appointed time, He will also bring us out of our wilderness seasons when the time is right. But the preparation that happens in the wilderness is not to be underestimated. It is in the wilderness that we learn to rely solely on God, where we are tested and refined, and where we discover strength we never knew we had. The wilderness season may be difficult, but it is in these moments of testing and isolation that we are formed into the people God needs us to be in order to accomplish His purposes. It is in the wilderness that we learn to trust. We learn that God is faithful even when we can't see the way forward. We learn that His provision is enough even when our resources seem limited. We learn to hear His voice clearly in the quietness of the desert, away from the noise of the world. And it is here that we discover a deeper intimacy with God, a relationship that is built on trust and reliance rather than on the applause of the crowd or the approval of others. The wilderness is not a place to run from. It is a place to embrace. It is where God shapes us, refines us, and prepares us for what lies ahead. So, when you find yourself in a season of solitude, struggle, or confusion, remember this: you are not forgotten. You are being prepared. The wilderness may be uncomfortable, but it is not the end. It is the place where God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. In the depths of despair, when the weight of the world feels too heavy to bear and the strength to keep going seems to slip away, it is in these moments of weakness that God's strength is most profoundly revealed. For many, weakness is something to be avoided or hidden, a sign of failure or inadequacy. But in the eyes of God, it is not a weakness to be ashamed of. It is the very place where His strength can be most fully displayed. It is in the moments when a man feels he cannot go on, when he is stripped of his own ability and power, that he encounters a strength beyond himself. In these seasons, we are brought face to face with our limitations, with the harsh reality that there are situations in life we cannot control, people we cannot change, and outcomes we cannot determine. It is in these moments of helplessness that God's strength becomes the most evident. His power working through our weakness is the most beautiful and transformative force in the world. Paul, one of the greatest apostles of the early church, spoke of this profound truth when he described his own struggles and hardships. He prayed 3 times for God to remove a thorn in the flesh that tormented him. But God's answer was not to take away the pain, but to declare, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. Paul's response to this divine revelation was profound. "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul recognized that it was not in his strength that God's glory was most fully revealed, but in his weakness. In that place of vulnerability, Paul was able to experience the sufficiency of God's grace and the depth of His power. This concept seems counterintuitive to the world's understanding of strength. In society, we are taught to rely on our own abilities, to push through adversity with sheer willpower, to overcome challenges through personal strength and determination. But God calls us to a different way of thinking. He invites us to surrender our reliance on self and to trust in His power. He shows us that true strength is not about what we can do in our own strength, but about what He can do through us when we are willing to admit our need for Him. When we are at our lowest, when we feel completely powerless, we are often more open to God's work in our lives. It is then that we stop relying on our own ingenuity, wisdom, or resources and begin to lean fully on Him. In our weakness, we make space for God's power to shine. His strength does not come to us in the way we expect. It is not a human kind of strength defined by physical might or self-sufficiency. It is a divine strength, a power that is gentle yet unshakable, a power that gives us the courage to stand when we want to fall, the wisdom to know what to do when we are confused, and the peace to endure when we feel overwhelmed. God's strength does not negate our weakness. It is made perfect through it. It is as though God takes our frailty and through His grace turns it into something beautiful, something powerful. In moments of despair, when we are broken and weary, God meets us with the power to rise again. His strength sustains us when we cannot sustain ourselves. His strength carries us when our legs give out. His strength lifts us when we are too tired to keep going. The beauty of this divine strength is that it transforms us. We come out of the trials, the times of weakness, stronger than before, not because we did it in our own power, but because we allowed God to work through us. When we acknowledge our dependence on Him, we open ourselves up to His transformative power. We emerge from weakness not as the same person, but as someone who has been shaped, refined, and empowered by God Himself. The truth is, God's strength is not given to us in the absence of weakness, but in the midst of it. It is when we are weak that we are most able to experience His strength in its purest form. When we feel like we have nothing left, that is when He can fill us with everything we need. In that moment of divine exchange, we realize that the very thing we thought would defeat us, the trial, the struggle, the weakness,